The ring indent on my husband's finger was gone. 7 years of marriage, one small white circle on his ring finger that I used to kiss in the mornings. And on a Tuesday, standing in our marble bathroom, 7 months pregnant, I looked down and it was just gone, faded, like no ring had ever lived there at all. That was the morning my whole life started falling apart. I found the hotel receipt in his suit pocket. I watched him laugh at a text the way he used to laugh at me. I sat in a hotel lobby and watched him kiss another woman against an elevator wall. And when I finally told him I was leaving, when I was 8.5 months pregnant with his daughter, he grabbed my hair and he slammed my head against the refrigerator. I hit the marble floor. I tasted blood in my mouth. My hands went around my belly. Protect the baby, protect the baby, protect the baby. And then a stranger walked through my door. A man I barely knew, a former Marine, a former UFC fighter, and in one single punch, he ended it. But that was only the beginning. Because what came next, the trial, the truth about who my husband really was, the secret his own brother helped me uncover, and the quiet, beautiful way I finally took my life back, that is the part I need you to hear. Stay with me, because somewhere in this story, you might find your own answer. Short lesson bridge. Sometimes the door to your freedom has been unlocked the whole time. You just have to find the courage to walk through it. If you believe every woman deserves safety, dignity, and a second chance at her own life, take 1 second right now and hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel so stories like this one can reach the woman who needs it most tonight. And if you think someone in your life should hear this, please share it. Your share could save someone. Now, let me tell you exactly how it all happened.
The ring indent was gone. Eleanor Prescott stood in the marble bathroom of the penthouse she shared with her husband, 7 months pregnant, staring at a small white circle that used to be on his ring finger. Used to be. She had seen that circle every morning for 7 years. The faint, pale band where his wedding ring had lived. It was the first thing she noticed when he stretched across the bed in the morning, the thing she kissed, sometimes when he was still asleep. Now it was gone. The skin there was tan, even, as if no ring had ever lived there at all. "Eleanor?" Whit's voice drifted in from the bedroom. "Are you coming to breakfast?" "In a minute," she said. Her voice came out normal. She was surprised by that. Her voice came out like a woman whose world had not just tilted. She pressed her hand against the cold marbles of the sink, took a breath. The baby kicked, soft and low, a small foot against her rib. "I'm coming," she said again, louder this time. Just finishing it up, she walked into the kitchen on legs that did not feel like her own. The penthouse was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. Central Park spread out below them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, green and gold in the morning light. The coffee was already brewing. The housekeeper had left fresh flowers on the island. Peonies, white peonies, because Whit had told the florist he was tired of roses. Whit was scrolling through his phone at the counter. "Morning, sweetheart," he said without looking up. "Morning," Ellie replied. He kissed her forehead, distracted. The way a man kisses a forehead when he is thinking of something else. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down at it, and he laughed. It was a low laugh, private, pleased. The kind of laugh that lives in the stomach, not the throat. Ellie had not heard that laugh in a very long time. She stood at the coffee machine, her back to him, her hand on the handle of her cup, and she tried to remember the last time she had heard that laugh. Tuscany, their honeymoon, a small hotel in the hills. He had laughed like that in the morning when she had come out to the terrace in his shirt, and nothing else. She had not heard it since. "Who is that?" she asked. Light, airy, a wife asking a casual question. Whit said. He was still smiling. "Oh, nobody. A joke from the office." "A joke?" she said. Garrett sent it." He put the phone face down. "Not very funny, really." Garrett was his brother, his estranged brother, the one they had not spoken to in 5 years. Ellie did not say that out loud. She poured her coffee. She sat down. She buttered a piece of toast. She ate it without tasting it. Whit talked about a board meeting. She nodded in the right places. She smiled when he smiled. She laughed when he laughed. Inside her chest, something was beginning to come apart. Not loudly, not in one big crack, just slowly, quietly. The way ice shifts in a glass before anyone notices. When he left for the office, she stood at the door and watched him go. "Have a good day," she said. "You too, honey. Rest." The elevator doors closed, and Ellie walked back to the kitchen island, picked up her phone, and did something she had not done in 7 years of marriage. She opened Instagram. She typed his name into the search bar. She looked at his profile. Then she looked at who had liked his last 3 posts. She scrolled. Slowly, she locked the phone. She unlocked it. She locked it again. She did this 5 more times, for no reason, for every reason. "I'm being crazy," she whispered to the empty kitchen. The baby kicked again. "I'm being crazy," she said again, as if saying it twice would make it true. But she was not being crazy. And somewhere, deep down, behind the 7 years of ignoring small things and explaining away smaller things, she already knew that. She walked to the front closet. She took out the navy suit he had worn yesterday. She had told the housekeeper she wanted to send it to the dry cleaner herself today. Because she had an errand in the city. Because she liked to take little walks. Both of those things were true. Neither of those things was the reason. She put her hand in the inside breast pocket. Something crinkled. She pulled it out. It was a receipt. The Pierre Hotel. Room service. 1 bottle of champagne, 2 glasses. Tuesday. 2 weeks ago. Tuesday. 2 weeks ago, Whit had been in Chicago for the Marriott acquisition. She had driven him to the airport herself. She held the receipt in her hand. The paper was thin. Her fingers were shaking. She almost put it back. She almost folded it small and tucked it back into the pocket and pretended she had never seen it. She almost did. She stood in the front hallway of the penthouse for a very long time, holding a receipt for a champagne she had not drunk at a hotel where her husband was not supposed to be on a Tuesday. She had thought he was in Chicago. "I'm not imagining this," she said out loud to the empty apartment. "Something is wrong." The baby kicked. She sat down slowly on the little silk bench in the entryway. The one Vivian, her mother-in-law, had picked out, because Ellie had picked out a different bench. And Vivian had said it was not right for the space, and Ellie had let her change it. She had let a lot of things be changed. She sat on the bench that was not hers, in the apartment that was not really hers, wearing a cashmere robe Whit had bought her. Carrying a baby who was already registered at a preschool Vivian had chosen. "I'm not imagining this," she said again. She walked to the kitchen. She opened her laptop. She typed the address of the Pierre Hotel into the reservation page. She looked at next Tuesday. There was a room available. She booked it. Her hand shook on the mouse. "Just to see," she whispered. "I'm just going to go and see." The baby kicked again, harder this time, like a yes. Ellie closed the laptop. She did not cry. She did not call her best friend. She did not call her mother. She did not do any of the things a woman is supposed to do when she finds the first shard of the broken mirror. She went into the guest room. She lay down on the bed, and she stared at the ceiling for a very long time. And in her chest, behind her ribs, behind the baby, behind the 7 years of small silences, a voice was beginning to speak. It was a very quiet voice, small as a pin, but it was speaking. And what it was saying was this: "You have known this for a long time. You just did not want to know it." Eleanor Prescott closed her eyes. She put both hands on her belly. And for the first time in 7 years of marriage, she did not try to talk herself out of what she knew. Outside, the city kept moving. Taxis, delivery trucks, a dog barking on the sidewalk below. The world did not stop for a woman learning her life was a lie. The world almost never does. The days between finding the receipt and Tuesday moved like a strange, thick dream. Ellie kept pretending. She made the coffee. She kissed her husband. She went to her prenatal yoga class. She smiled at the doorman. She ordered the groceries. She laid out Whit's shirts for the week. She was a very good actress. She had not known that about herself until now. On Wednesday morning, she sat across from Whit at the breakfast table and watched him eat a piece of melon. He chewed, he scrolled, he said something about the Knicks. She watched his hands, the hands that had held hers at the altar, the hands that once, years ago, had pushed her gently through a crowded subway car to protect her belly from a stranger's elbow, the hands that now typed under the edge of the table, where he thought she could not see the glow of the phone screen against his thigh. "Anything interesting?" she asked. Your phone. Oh, just work. Ah. She buttered another piece of toast. She did not eat it. "I was thinking," she said, "I might go into the city today. Have lunch with Colette." "Colette," Whit said. And something in his tone cooled. "That's nice." Colette Ashford had been Ellie's best friend since college. She was also a partner at one of the most feared divorce firms in Manhattan. Whit had never liked her. "I won't be late," Ellie said. He stood. He kissed the top of her head. "Have fun, sweetheart." The elevator doors closed. Ellie sat at the table for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She did not call Colette. Not yet. She opened her texts and sat there staring at Colette's name. "Just to understand my options," she whispered. Hypothetically. She pressed call. Colette picked up on the second ring. "Ellie, honey, are you okay?" Colette was a truth teller. She had always been a truth teller. She had been biting her tongue about Whit for 7 years, and it showed, sometimes, in the tight little pause before she answered the phone. "Can I come see you today?" Ellie asked. "At the office?" A beat. "Of course, babe. When?" "Now." "I'll clear my afternoon." Ellie hung up. She stood. She put on a soft gray sweater and flat shoes because her feet were swollen. She took the elevator down to the lobby. The doorman tipped his hat. "Good morning, Mrs. Hargrove." "Good morning, Philip." Mrs. Hargrove. She had been Mrs. Hargrove for 7 years. She had signed checks as Mrs. Hargrove. She had been introduced as Mrs. Hargrove at more charity events than she could count. She had heard that name so many times it had stopped sounding like a costume and started sounding like her skin. It had never been her skin. It had always been a costume. She had just forgotten. Colette's office was on the 34th floor of a glass tower on Park Avenue. The reception area smelled like fresh lilies and fear. Rich men's wives sat on leather couches reading magazines they were not reading. Ellie knew, sitting there, that she had become one of them. Colette walked out to meet her herself. She did not send an assistant. "Come on, sweetheart," she said. Colette's office had a view of the East River. She closed the door behind them. She did not sit behind her desk. She sat on the couch next to Ellie and took her hand. "Tell me," Colette said. And Ellie, who had not cried yet, who had been holding herself together with small, careful pins for 4 days, began to cry. She told Colette everything. The ring indent, the laugh, the receipt, the Pierre Hotel reservation she had made for next Tuesday just to see. Colette listened. She did not interrupt. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not say the things a bad friend would have said. When Ellie finished, Colette squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart," she said, "let me help you." "I don't know what I want yet," Ellie said. "I don't know anything yet." "That's okay. We don't do anything yet. We just prepare," Colette opened a drawer. She took out a legal pad. She began to write. Safety deposit box, she said. Not in the joint name, in yours only. We put copies of everything. Your passport, your social security card, your marriage certificate, the prenup. Okay? A separate bank account. A small one. We open it today. I have a banker I trust. Okay? A burner phone. In my office. You leave it here. If you ever need me, and he is watching your phone, you come here and you use it. Ellie looked up. Why would he be watching my phone? Colette looked at her for a long moment. Ellie, she said gently, has Whit ever been physical with you? The room went quiet. Ellie opened her mouth. She closed it. 4 months ago, in the kitchen, he had grabbed her wrist because she had said something he did not like. He had squeezed it hard enough that the bruises lasted 2 weeks. She had worn long sleeves to Thanksgiving. She had told herself it was stress. The acquisition had been stressful. He had been stressed. Once, she whispered. Just once, my wrist. It wasn't, he did not mean he was stressed. Colette's jaw tightened. Okay, Colette said quietly. Okay, sweetheart, thank you for telling me. Ellie began to cry again. He isn't a bad man, she said. He isn't. I know how this sounds. But he isn't. Okay, honey. Okay. He loved me. He did. I believe you. I don't know what's happening. Colette pulled her close. Ellie pressed her face into her friend's shoulder, and she cried in a way she had not cried in years. Her belly pressed between them. The baby kicked once, like a small hello, and both women laughed through the tears. Okay, Mama, Colette said, wiping her own eyes. We got this. You and me and this baby. We got this. She went back to the penthouse that afternoon. She could not make herself go inside. She sat in her parked Mercedes in the parking garage underneath the building for 47 minutes. She counted. 47 minutes. She played an old song from college on her phone, and she watched a small gray spider build a web in the corner of the parking garage wall, and she cried without sound. She was sitting in a car she had not chosen in a parking garage. She had not chosen, waiting to go up to an apartment she had not chosen. Somewhere along the way, she said out loud to the steering wheel, I became invisible. Her voice was steady. That was what shocked her. Her voice was steady. I became invisible, she said again. She put her hands on her belly. You, she said to her daughter, you will never be invisible. Not one day, not 1 minute. I am going to make sure of that. She got out of the car. She took the elevator up. She walked into the penthouse like a woman going back into a life that was already over and that no one else knew was over yet. Whit was home early. Where were you? He said. He was standing in the kitchen with a glass of scotch. Lunch with Colette, Ellie said. I told you this morning. You were gone for 6 hours. I was tired. I sat in the park. Eleanor, he said. His voice was quiet. The quiet voice scared her more than the loud one. You did not answer your phone. My phone died. Your phone did not die. She looked at him. He was standing in their kitchen with a drink, in a shirt she had bought him, in a home she had decorated with a mother-in-law who had chosen everything that mattered. And he was angry because she had not told him where she was for 6 hours. I did not realize, Ellie said slowly, that I had to account for my afternoons. Something in his face shifted. For a moment, for just a moment, she did not know the man standing across from her. For a moment, he was a stranger, and then he smiled. He set down the drink. He came around the island, and he put his arms around her. I was worried, he said into her hair. That's all, the baby and everything. I just want to know where you are. She stood still in his arms. She did not hug him back. She did not push him away. She stood there, carrying his child, being held by a man she did not recognize, and she thought to herself, very clearly, On Tuesday, I will go to the Pierre Hotel. On Tuesday, I will know. And after I know, I will decide who I want to be. Tuesday came the way all days come, whether you are ready or not. Ellie wore a soft cream dress and a wide hat. She told Whit she was going to a baby shower in Westchester. He kissed her cheek without looking at her. He was already on a call. She drove into the city. She parked 3 blocks from the Pierre. She walked the rest of the way. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. She was 7 months pregnant, and she was about to watch her marriage end in real time. And the strangest thing was how calm she felt. Not peaceful, calm. The way water is calm right before a boat tips. She sat in the lobby of the Pierre Hotel with a book in her lap. She did not read it. She watched the revolving door. At 2:47 in the afternoon, her husband walked in. He was laughing. Next to him was a woman in a camel coat. Her hair was honey blonde. She was 26, maybe 27. She walked like a woman who had been told all her life that she was beautiful. Her hand was on Whit's back. They walked to the elevator bank. They waited. Whit leaned down and said something into her ear. She laughed. He pushed her gently against the marble wall between the elevators, and he kissed her. He kissed her the way he used to kiss Ellie years ago. In Tuscany. The book dropped from Ellie's lap. It made a small, soft sound on the carpet. The concierge hurried over. "Are you all right, madam?" Ellie looked up at him. She was a 30-something woman, very pregnant, sitting in the lobby of an expensive hotel, watching her husband kiss another woman against a wall. "I don't know," she said. "I honestly don't know." The concierge helped her pick up the book. He asked if she needed water. She said no. She said thank you. She walked out of the Pierre Hotel on her own 2 feet, and she got into her car, and she drove. She did not drive back to the penthouse. She drove to Connecticut. Her mother's house was small. It had a red door and a white porch and a crooked oak tree in the front yard that Ellie had climbed when she was 7 years old. She pulled into the driveway. She turned off the engine. She sat in the car. The front door opened. Her mother, Margaret Prescott, came out in a cardigan. Her hair was gray now. She was 58. She was holding 2 mugs of tea. Margaret did not ask what was wrong. She did not ask why her pregnant daughter was sitting in the driveway without calling first. She walked around to the passenger side. She opened the door. She got in. She handed Ellie a mug. "Take your time, baby," Margaret said. "I've got all day." They sat in the car and drank tea. They watched the oak tree. After a while, Margaret said, "Do you want to come inside?" "Not yet." "Okay." They sat longer. A squirrel ran across the lawn. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the street. The afternoon light shifted slowly through the leaves. "Mama?" Ellie said finally. "Yes, baby. He is cheating on me." Margaret breathed in. She breathed out. She did not look surprised. "Okay, honey. I saw him at a hotel with a woman. Okay. I don't know what to do." Margaret reached over and took her hand. "You come inside," she said. "You eat something. You sleep in your old room. Tomorrow, you wake up and you do the next right thing. You don't have to know everything today. You just have to know the next one thing." Ellie put her forehead down on the steering wheel, and she sobbed. She slept 12 hours. When she woke up, the light in her childhood bedroom was soft and gray. The curtains were the same curtains her mother had hung when Ellie was 14. There was still a poster of Audrey Hepburn on the wall. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her back ached. The baby shifted. She looked under the bed. She did not know why. It was one of those instincts that has no reason. She got down on her hands and knees, awkward with her belly, and she pulled out a dusty cardboard box with her own handwriting on the lid. The writing was her own from when she was 21. Round letters, hopeful letters. The kind of writing a young woman does when she does not yet know which of her dreams are about to die. Art things, the box said. She opened it. Inside were her sketchbooks, 6 of them. The charcoal pencils she had loved, wrapped in a rubber band. A small tin box of oil pastels. A letter of acceptance from the art history program at Columbia that she had gone to for 1 semester before she had met Wit, and somehow, over the next year, had slowly stopped going. She had told herself she had stopped because she had wanted to. She had told herself for 7 years that she had stopped because she had wanted to. She opened a sketchbook. The pages were full of women. Fierce, living, laughing, crying, angry, dancing women. Women with their mouths open. Women with their hair in the wind. Women with coffee cups. Women with cigarettes. A self-portrait at 22. Her hair was wild. She was laughing. She was holding a cup of coffee. She was holding a cup of black coffee. Ellie sat on the floor of her childhood bedroom, 7 months pregnant, holding a drawing of a 22-year-old version of herself who drank black coffee and laughed with her whole mouth open. "I used to be someone," she whispered, "before I was his." She sat with the drawing in her lap for a long time. She did not cry. Something in her was past crying. She got up. She found a pencil in the box. She opened to a blank page. She tried to draw. Her hand shook. She drew a single line. She stopped. She closed the book. She could not sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, she walked downstairs in her mother's old robe. The house was quiet. Her mother's tabby cat, Henry, blinked at her from the couch. Ellie went into the kitchen. She opened the spice cabinet. It was a mess. Her mother had never been an organized woman. There were 3 half-empty bottles of cumin, a paprika from the Clinton administration, a jar of rosemary that had lost its smell. Ellie pulled everything out. She arranged it on the counter. Alphabetical, allspice, basil, bay leaves, black pepper, cardamom, chili powder, cinnamon, cloves, coriander, cumin. She did not know why she was doing this. She was doing it because she needed something to be in order. She worked for 2 hours. She threw out the expired jars. She wiped down the shelves with a damp cloth. She arranged everything in a perfect, alphabetical, quiet line. When she was done, she stood back. She looked at the cabinet. It was a small thing. It was the smallest thing. But it was something she could fix. "I'm going to have to fix everything in my life," she said to the dark kitchen. "One cabinet at a time." She closed the cabinet door. The baby kicked. "I know, baby," Ellie said. "I know, I know, I know." Her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Wit. "Where are you?" She stared at the screen. She did not answer. It buzzed again. "Eleanor, where are you?" And a third time. "Call me back right now." She looked at her mother's clock on the wall. It was almost 3. She picked up the phone. She typed with her thumbs. "With my mother. Overnight. See you tomorrow." She set the phone down. It rang. She silenced it. It rang again. She silenced it again. The third time it rang, she turned it face down. She sat at the kitchen table in her mother's old robe, and she watched the phone vibrate itself slowly across the wood. And a thought arrived in her chest, small and clear and strange. "He is afraid," she thought. "For the first time in 7 years, he is afraid. He does not know where I am. He does not know what I am doing. He does not know what I am thinking. And for the first time in a long time, neither do I." And that, she thought, is a beginning. She drove back to the city the next morning. She did not know what she was going to do. She only knew she was not going to keep pretending. The penthouse was quiet. Wit was at the office. The housekeeper was in the laundry room. Ellie walked to the kitchen island, and she stood there, her hand on the cold marble, and she waited. She made herself a cup of coffee. She pulled the Pierre Hotel receipt out of her purse, the one from 2 weeks ago. She had kept it folded in a small inside pocket. She laid it flat on the marble. She waited. Whit came home at 6. He walked in, smiling, loosening his tie, ready to play the good husband, the concerned father-to-be, the man who had been worried about her overnight. "Sweetheart," he said, "where were you? I was out of my mind." Ellie did not stand up. "Whit," she said, "sit down." Something in her voice made him pause. He sat. She slid the receipt across the marble island. He looked at it. He looked at her. And what happened next was the thing that broke her heart in a way the betrayal itself had not. He did not panic. He did not apologize. He sighed, the way a man sighs when his wife is being tedious. "Eleanor," he said, "don't do this while you are pregnant. Your hormones are unreliable right now." She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, and she saw, for the first time, clearly, that the man she had married was not a monster. He was not a villain. He was not some dark and terrible force. He was small. He was a small, selfish, cowardly man who had been handed too much money too young and who had never once, in his 41 years on Earth, been told no by anyone who mattered. He isn't a monster, she thought. He's just small. And that is so much worse. "I saw you at the Pierre yesterday," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, with a blonde woman in a camel coat. He went still. "You kissed her in front of the elevators at 2:47 in the afternoon." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. "Whit, please, do not lie to me." He closed his mouth. He picked up the receipt. "Eleanor," he said, "but do not say my name like that, like you are trying to soothe a child. I am a grown woman. I have caught my husband cheating on me, and I deserve the dignity of you not lying to my face." He looked at her, and she saw for the first time something like fear. Not because she had caught him. She had caught him, and he could spin that. He could lawyer that. He was afraid because he was looking at her and he did not recognize her. "Her name is Harper," he said quietly. "It isn't serious." "How long?" "Eleanor." "How long, Whit?" A pause. 14 months. The baby kicked. 14 months meant she had gotten pregnant while he was sleeping with another woman. 14 months meant he had held her in their bedroom at the ultrasound appointment, where they had learned they were having a girl, and then he had driven to a hotel and had done the same with another woman. 14 months meant every dinner, every anniversary, every quiet Sunday morning with the newspaper had been a lie. She did not cry. She was past crying. She had cried in her childhood driveway, and she had cried in Colette's office. And she had cried into her pillow until the pillow was wet and cold. She was done crying at Whit. "Get out of the apartment," she said. "Eleanor, come on. Let's talk about this. Get out. Tonight. Go to a hotel. Go to Harper. I don't care. Get out. You cannot throw me out of my own apartment. Watch me." Something flashed in his face. The small man was gone. In his place was the man who grabbed wrists, the man who shouted in boardrooms, the man who had been told all his life that he was a king. "You are being hysterical," he said. "I am being clear. Your hormones are fine." "Eleanor," he said, and the voice was cold now, the quiet, cold voice that scared her. "You are not going to throw me out of my home. You are not going to embarrass me. You are not going to do this." She stood up from the stool. She was 7 months pregnant. She was shorter than he was. She was, on paper, a woman with no money of her own, no job of her own, no family fortune, no army at her back. She stood up anyway. "I am doing it," she said. He did not leave. She did. She packed a small bag. She took her passport. She took her mother's pearl earrings. She took the burner phone. Colette had given her. She took the stack of photocopied documents Colette had helped her make. She took the framed picture of her father from the nightstand. She did not take the cashmere robe. She did not take the jewelry he had given her. She did not take any of the things he thought he had bought her with. She called Colette from the burner phone from the back of an Uber. "I'm coming to your place. I already made up the guest room. Colette." "I know, babe. I know. Just come. I have wine. I have soup. I have the good blankets." Ellie hung up. She rested her head against the cool glass of the Uber window. She watched the city go by. Harper. Her name was Harper. She had been one half of a thing for 14 months that Ellie had thought was her whole life. She had been a name in a phone, a laugh in a kitchen, a woman in a camel coat. Harper. Ellie was not going to hate her. Not yet. Hating her would come later, and then hating her would stop, and then she would see Harper for what she was. Another young woman who had been told all her life that she was beautiful, and who had been handed a very rich man, and who had believed the things men like that tell women like her. Harper, she thought. He threw my life away for a woman named Harper. And the laugh that came up from her throat, suddenly, in the back of that Uber, surprised her more than anything else had in the last week. She laughed. She laughed hard. The driver looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, you okay?" "I'm great," Ellie said. "I am, I swear. I am actually great." She laughed the rest of the way to Colette's. She did not know then that she had 11 more days in her old life. She did not know that Whit was going to come home that night and drink until his eyes were glass. She did not know that Vivian was going to call her from a blocked number and leave a voicemail in which she said, coldly, "Eleanor, you will not do this to my son." She did not know that Harper Marlowe, the other woman, had by that afternoon already been given a set of Vivian's grandmother's emerald earrings, the ones Vivian had promised to Ellie. She did not know that 11 days from that Uber ride, she would be lying on the marble floor of the kitchen, her hands around her belly, tasting copper in her mouth. She did not know any of it. She knew only that she had told the truth. She had told one true thing, and one true thing was a beginning. The lawyers came at her first. Colette had warned her. Colette had said, "Ellie, he is going to try to make you disappear before he has to pay for anything. He is going to try to make you look crazy. He is going to try to get you to sign something. Do not sign anything. Do not say anything on the phone. Do not open the door to anyone you do not know." Ellie did not open the door, but they still came. A process server found her at Colette's building. A private investigator took pictures of her from a car across the street. A reporter from a gossip website called her mother's house and pretended to be an old high school friend. Vivian called, repeatedly, "Eleanor, this is ridiculous. Come home, we can fix this. My son is miserable. Think of the baby, think of the family, think of the name." Ellie did not answer. On day 9, Whit called her from a number she did not recognize. She answered because she thought it was her obstetrician. "Eleanor, please, just come to the apartment. We need to talk." "No. I am begging you. I am sick about this. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. Please just come. Just talk to me. Just one conversation, and if you still want to do this, I will respect it. Whit, please." She closed her eyes. She was 8.5 months pregnant. She had been sleeping on Colette's pull-out couch because the guest bed hurt her back. Her ankles were the size of grapefruits. Colette's cat, a huge old Maine Coon named Walter, had been sleeping on her feet every night. She was exhausted. She was afraid. And under all of that, under the lawyers and the private investigator and the reporter and the mother-in-law, there was a small, soft, terrible hope that was still inside her. Some tiny part of her that still, against her own will, still after everything, still, wondered if he might mean it. She hated that part of herself, but it was there. One conversation, she said. At the apartment, in the kitchen, in the morning. Colette knows where I am. If I am not back by 11, she is calling the police. Eleanor, it is not like that. Those are the terms. A long breath. Okay. She went. She went on a Tuesday morning. She should have known. Tuesdays had become the day her life tipped. She took a car. She wore a soft black dress. She wore flat shoes because her feet would not fit in anything else. She brought a small purse with the burner phone in it. She had texted Colette the address and the time. The doorman let her up. She walked into the apartment that used to be hers, and she smelled the familiar peonies and the fresh coffee, and underneath it all, a perfume that was not hers. Harper had been here. Harper had probably been here last night. Whit was in the kitchen. He looked terrible. That surprised her. His eyes were red. His shirt was wrinkled. There was a glass of scotch next to the coffee pot at 9:30 in the morning. Eleanor. Whit. He came toward her. She stepped back. Do not touch me. Stand there. He stopped. His hands opened at his sides. Okay. Okay. She walked to the island. She kept the marble counter between them. Talk, she said. I am so sorry. Okay. I am going to end it. With her. I already have. Okay. I love you. I have always loved you. This was a mistake. It was a long, stupid mistake, and I hate myself, and I am asking you, please, please come home. Come home, and we will fix this. She looked at him. She looked at the man she had married. The man whose laugh she had fallen in love with at a party when she was 22. The man who had once, years ago, driven her home from the hospital after a bad flu and had carried her up the stairs because she was too weak to walk. She still loved him. That was the worst part. She still loved him, and she was still going to leave him, and both of those things were going to be true for a long time. Whit, she said gently. Thank you for saying that. Eleanor, but I am not coming back. His face changed. She saw it happen. The softening was gone. The begging was gone. In its place was the other man, the man who grabbed wrists, the man who had been told no maybe 4 times in his entire life. You are being unreasonable. I am being clear. Eleanor, we have a child. I know. You are not taking my child. The baby kicked. Hard. Twice. I am not taking her from you, Ellie said. She will know you. You will see her. We will figure it out, but I am not coming back to this apartment, and I am not coming back to this marriage, and I am filing for divorce, Whit. I already have. The papers were served to your lawyer this morning. He went very still. The scotch was in his hand. She had not seen him pick it up. You filed. Yes? Before coming here? Yes. You came here to what? Look me in the eye while you gut me. I came here because you asked me to. He threw the glass. It hit the wall behind her. It shattered. Small shards of crystal rained down onto the marble floor. The scotch made a dark, wet shape on the white paint of the wall. Whit? He came around the island. Whit, stop. He grabbed her arm. You do not get to do this. You do not get to walk in here and humiliate me and then walk out. You do not get to take my child and my name. Let go of my arm. I built this. I gave you this. I gave you every single thing you have. Let go. You were nothing when I met you. She tried to pull away. His hand went to her hair, and then, in a way that happens too fast to understand, while it is happening, she was moving. Her body was moving, not by her choice. He had her by the hair, and he was turning her, and her face was going toward the refrigerator, and the metal was cold and bright, and there was a sound, a dull, heavy, wet sound, her head against the steel. The world went white. she fell. She did not feel herself fall. She felt the floor, the cold marble. Her hands were already on her belly. Her hands knew, before her brain knew, what to protect. Protect the baby. Protect the baby. Protect the baby. She tasted copper. Wit was above her. Eleanor. Eleanor. Get up. Eleanor, you made me. Eleanor. She was not unconscious. She was somewhere else. The sounds came to her through water. She heard the apartment buzzer. She heard the front door open. She heard a man's voice, calm, low, a voice she did not know. Step away from her, Mr. Hargrove. The doorman had heard the shouting. The doorman had called building security, and building security that morning had been led by a new man, Declan Boyd, former Marine, former UFC middleweight, 2 years retired, now running executive protection for the Hargrove hotel chain. He had been in the lobby for a meeting with the head of housekeeping. He had heard the call over the radio. He had run. He walked into the kitchen. He saw a pregnant woman on the floor. He saw blood in her hair. He saw a man standing over her. He saw, in about 1/2 of a second, what kind of man he was dealing with. Step away from her, sir. This is a private matter. Step away. You work for me. I work for Hargrove Security, Mr. Hargrove. I do not work for you personally. Wit swung at him, wild, panicked, the swing of a man who had never in his life been in a real fight. Declan slipped it. One punch, a clean right cross. Wit dropped like a dropped coat. He was out before he hit the floor. Declan did not stop to look at him. He was already on the phone. 911. I have a woman. Pregnant, head injury, conscious but disoriented. The assailant is unconscious. I have him secured. He knelt next to Ellie. He pressed a kitchen towel to the side of her head. Ma'am, I need you to stay with me. Don't close your eyes. Look at me. She looked at him. He had kind eyes, brown, steady. Ma'am, what is your baby's name? She said. I have not. Picked one. Okay, sweetheart. Then you better stick around long enough to pick one, you hear me? Yes. What is your own name? Eleanor. Eleanor. Good. Eleanor, what is the year? 2025. Good. Eleanor, who is the president? She told him. Good, Eleanor. Great. We are going to be okay. Help is coming. I am right here. He kept talking to her, soft, steady, the way a man talks to a wounded animal he does not want to spook. She kept her hands on her belly. She did not move them. The baby kicked. The baby kicked. The baby kicked. There she is, Declan said, watching her belly move under her dress. There she is, Mama. She is letting you know. Ellie began to cry. Not for herself. Not for the bruise that was forming along her temple. Not for the blood in her hair. She cried because her daughter, her 8.5-month-old daughter, was still kicking, and that meant her daughter was still here, and that meant she had not lost everything on the morning she tried to do one brave thing. Stay with me, Eleanor, Declan said. I am right here. I am right here. You are not alone. The hospital was white and quiet. Fluorescent lights, the steady thump of the fetal monitor, a nurse writing numbers on a clipboard, 142, 146, 144, the baby was fine, the baby was fine, the baby was fine. Ellie was not fine. She had 6 stitches in her scalp, a mild concussion, a bruise along her temple that was turning, hour by hour, the color of an old storm cloud. She was going to be all right. The doctor, a kind woman named Priscilla Wren, who had been her obstetrician from the start, kept saying it. You are going to be all right, Eleanor. You and the baby. You are going to be all right. Ellie nodded. She said thank you. She said it again. She nodded at her mother. She nodded at Colette. She nodded at the nurse. Inside, she was not inside. Inside, she had gone somewhere else. She was in a place she did not have a word for, a place past crying, a place past anger, a place that was very quiet and very cold and very far away. Her mother sat on the edge of the hospital bed. Margaret did not say anything. She climbed at one point all the way onto the bed, and she put her arms around her daughter the way she had when Ellie had the flu at 7 years old. She held her daughter. She did not speak. She held her. Ellie pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. "Mama?" "I know, baby. Mama. I know. I know. I know." At 3 in the morning, she was alone. The nurse had dimmed the lights. Margaret had finally gone to the waiting room to sleep for a few hours. Colette was at the apartment gathering things. The fluorescent hum of the hall was distant. Ellie stared at the ceiling. She counted the tiles. There were 47. She counted them again. 47. She counted them a third time. 47. If I am not his wife, she thought, who am I? If I am not Mrs. Hargrove. If I am not the woman in the penthouse. If I am not the mother-to-be at the charity benefit in the emerald earrings his grandmother never actually gave me. If I am not the woman whose mother-in-law repicks her furniture. If I am not the wife. Who am I? I am a woman with a bruised head, she thought, and a baby in my belly, and a maiden name I have not used in 7 years. I am Eleanor. Eleanor who? Eleanor what? The ceiling was quiet. The monitor beeped. Her daughter's heartbeat filled the room. Starting over feels impossible, Ellie whispered to the ceiling. Staying was worse. She said it twice. Then 3 times. Then she said it until she fell asleep. The detective came the next morning. He was an older man, big shoulders, white hair, a voice like somebody's grandfather. "Mrs. Hargrove, my name is Detective Harlan Briggs. I am with the 19th Precinct. I am here to take your statement. You can tell me to come back whenever you want. You can tell me no. You can tell me whatever you want. But I have to tell you, ma'am, in my experience with these cases, the sooner we get the statement, the better." Ellie looked at him. "Detective Briggs." "Yes, ma'am." "Please do not call me Mrs. Hargrove." "Yes, ma'am." "What would you like me to call you?" "Eleanor." "Eleanor? Or Ellie?" "Eleanor is a beautiful name." "Thank you." "Eleanor, I have to tell you something before we start. Your husband's lawyers are already making phone calls. I have been a detective a long time. I have done these cases a long time. With a man of his resources, ma'am, this is going to get ugly. I need you to know that before we start, because if we start, we have to finish, and I do not want you to think I am dragging you into something." Ellie looked at him. "Detective Briggs?" "Yes, ma'am." "It is already ugly. He just made it visible." Detective Briggs nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I suppose he did." She told him what had happened. She told him everything. The receipt, the Pierre, Harper, the kitchen, the hair, the refrigerator, the white flash, the floor. He wrote it all down. He asked for her phone. He photographed the bruises. He took a list of witnesses. Declan Boyd, the doorman. Colette, who had texted Ellie twice during the confrontation and would have a record of those texts showing she had expected a short meeting. When he was done, he stood. "Eleanor," he said. "Yes. I am going to say something off the record, off the official record. Okay. I have a daughter. She is 31. She is pregnant with her first. She lives in Jersey. If any man ever did to my daughter what your husband did to you, I do not know what I would do. I would like to think I would not do anything foolish. I would like to think I would let the law handle it. But I do not know, ma'am. I really do not know." His eyes were wet, just a little. He blinked hard. "I am going to handle this right, Eleanor," he said. "I am going to handle it right for you, like I would want Somebody to handle it for her. That is all. He put his card on the tray table. He walked out. Ellie closed her eyes. For the first time in a week, for the first time since she had stood in a bathroom staring at a missing ring indent, she felt something that might someday become safe. Not yet, but someday. He came in the afternoon. He knocked first. He stood in the doorway. He did not come inside until she nodded. Declan Boyd, the man who had hit her husband. He was holding flowers. They were terrible flowers. They were gas station flowers. A fistful of pink carnations and some bruised baby's breath, wrapped in crinkled plastic. She almost laughed. I didn't know what to bring, he said. I'm sorry. They looked better at the store. They look fine. Thank you. He stood at the foot of the bed. He did not sit. How are you, ma'am? Ellie, please. Ellie, how are you? Ian. I am alive. So is my daughter. That is all I know today. He nodded. There was a pause. Mr. Boyd. Declan, please. Declan, I wanted to say thank you. I do not think I said it. In the kitchen. I do not think I said it clearly. You don't owe me anything, ma'am. Ellie. Ellie, you don't owe me anything. I do. You saved my daughter's life. You saved mine. I owe you everything that can be owed. He looked at the floor. He was a big man, 6'2", maybe. His shoulders did not fit comfortably in his suit. He had knuckles that had been broken more than once and set more than once. He looked, standing in her hospital room with a gas station bouquet, like a man who did not know what to do with his own hands. I did my job, ma'am. I did what any person would do. Most people do not. He looked up. Yeah, he said. Well, most people should. He put the flowers on the windowsill. He reached into his pocket. He put a business card on her tray table. If you ever need anything, he said, any hour, for the case, for your daughter, for anything, you call me. Okay. Okay. He left. She looked at the card. Declan Boyd, Hargrove Hotel Group, Director of Executive Protection, a phone number. She picked it up. She looked at it for a long time. Then she put it in her purse. Not because she was looking for a man, because she was looking for a witness. She moved into her mother's guest room in Connecticut. It was the same room she had slept in as a teenager. Her mother had updated it since then. The poster of Audrey Hepburn was still on the wall, but the bedspread was new, a soft, pale green. Margaret had bought it in the first week. For you and the baby, Margaret had said, a fresh one. Ellie slept in that room for 6 weeks. Her body healed. The stitches came out. The bruise faded from purple to yellow to nothing. The baby kept growing. At her next appointment, Dr. Wren said the baby was measuring a little ahead. A good, strong little heart. A good, strong little heart. The first small thing was the coffee. She walked on the second morning at her mother's house to the diner on the corner. A bell rang when she opened the door. The diner smelled of bacon and cheap coffee and vinyl. A waitress named Dottie, who had been at that diner since Ellie was a kid, nodded at her. Honey, you want a booth or a stool? A booth. Coming right up. Ellie sat. Dottie brought a menu. Can I just start with coffee, please? Cream and sugar, honey. Ellie paused. She had drunk her coffee with cream and sugar for 7 years. Whit had told her, early on, that black coffee was unladylike. Whit had said, early on, that a woman should take her coffee the way she wanted her life. Sweet. He had said it as a joke. She had laughed at the time. She had not had black coffee since. Black, she said to Dottie. Just black, thank you. You got it. Dottie came back with the coffee. Ellie lifted it. She looked at it. It was just coffee. Black coffee, bitter coffee, in a thick white mug. She took a sip. It was terrible. She had forgotten how terrible. She had forgotten the sharpness, the way a black coffee punches you a little on the way down. She took another sip. It was still terrible. It was still hers. She sat in the booth at the corner diner in her hometown in Connecticut, and she drank a cup of black coffee, and her eyes filled with tears, and she did not wipe them, and she thought, quietly inside her own head, I had forgotten. I can have what I want. The second small thing was the sketchbook. She walked to the drugstore after breakfast. She walked slowly because her belly was heavy. The pharmacist smiled at her. She went to aisle 4. She picked up a cheap little spiral-bound sketchbook. $3.79. She bought a pack of drawing pencils. $6.22. She walked back to the diner with the bag. She sat in the same booth. Dottie brought her another coffee without being asked. Ellie opened the sketchbook. She looked at Dottie across the diner, pouring coffee for an old man at the counter. She began to draw. She drew Dottie. She drew Dottie's hair, which was pinned up with a pencil. She drew Dottie's forearm, the way the apron strap had dug a groove in her wrist over the years. She drew the curve of Dottie's lower back. Her hand did not shake. She drew for an hour. She drew badly. She drew the way a person who has not drawn in 4 years draws, with stiff lines and bad proportion. She did not care. She filled 2 pages. When she closed the book, she felt something in her chest that she had not felt in a long time. It was not happiness. Not yet. It was aliveness. It was the feeling of being somebody, doing something, because she wanted to. The third small thing was her name. She was sitting in her mother's kitchen a week later, going through a stack of paperwork with Colette on speakerphone. We need to decide the birth certificate name, Colette said. We can do Hargrove. We can do Prescott. We can do a hyphen. It is your call. It will affect the custody arrangement. But legally, for now, you can choose. Ellie looked out the window. Her mother's oak tree was beginning to turn. A few yellow leaves drifted on the lawn. Prescott, she said. You sure? I am sure. We can change it later if you change your mind. I'm not going to change my mind. Okay, babe. Colette. Yeah. When I married him, when I took his name, I did it because he said his mother would be so happy. He said she loved the idea of another Mrs. Hargrove. I did not even think about it. I did not even blink. I just walked into Mrs. Hargrove, like it was my destination. I remember. It was not my destination. I know, babe. I am Eleanor Prescott. Yes, you are. I am Eleanor Prescott. And my daughter is going to be a Prescott. Because that is her mother's name. Because we are a line of women. My mother was a Prescott. Her mother was a Prescott. Her mother's mother was a Prescott. Copy that. Prescott it is. Ellie sat at her mother's kitchen table, and she wrote her daughter's name for the first time, Prescott. She wrote it with the same round, hopeful letters she had used on the cardboard box in her bedroom at 21. The fourth small thing was Garrett. Was there. He knocked on her mother's door on a Tuesday afternoon. Ellie almost did not answer. Her mother was at the grocery store. Colette had told her not to open the door to anyone she did not know, but when she looked through the peephole, she saw a man who looked so much like Whit, and so little like Whit at the same time, that she opened the door without thinking. Garrett Hargrove, Whit's younger brother. He was 38. He was shorter than Whit, thinner. He had the Hargrove jaw, but not the Hargrove arrogance. He had left the family company 5 years ago over ethical disagreements about a hotel development in Dominica. He had not spoken to his mother since. He was holding a battered briefcase. Eleanor, he said, I am sorry to come unannounced. I did not want to put anything in a text that could be subpoenaed. May I come in? She let him in. They sat at the kitchen table. Eleanor, Garrett said, I have to tell you something, and I want to tell you something, before I give you these papers. I have to apologize. I have known my brother since I was born. I have known what kind of man he is for longer than I have wanted to admit. I saw you at Thanksgiving 5 years ago. You were wearing a long-sleeve shirt, and I saw the edge of a bruise on your wrist. I told myself it was probably nothing. I told myself it was not my business. I was a coward. 5 years, Eleanor. I was a coward for 5 years. She looked at him. And I am here, Garrett said, because I am not a coward anymore. Because of what he did to you in that kitchen. Because of what he almost did to your daughter. I cannot undo my silence. I cannot undo the 5 years, but I can do this. He slid the briefcase across the table. What is this? 2 years of financial records. He has been hiding assets. For a divorce, he has been planning since before you got pregnant. Offshore accounts, a Shell LLC in Delaware, a condo in Miami I am fairly sure is titled to Harper. Everything is in there. Dates, account numbers, bank statement. Ellie opened the briefcase. Documents, dozens of them, copies, originals, notarized pages. She looked up at her brother-in-law. Garrett. Yes. How did you get this? I used to have access. Some of it I got from people who owed me favors. Eleanor, it does not matter how I got it. It matters that you have it. Ellie looked at the documents. She looked at them for a long time. Garrett, she said quietly, he planned to leave me before I was even pregnant. Yes. Before we conceived her. Yes. I was just supposed to be grateful for longer. Yes. She put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry. She was done crying at Whit Hargrove. She closed the briefcase. Thank you, Garrett. You do not have to thank me, Eleanor. I owe you more than this. I owe your daughter more than this. Will you be a witness? Yes? Against your brother? Yes, against my brother. He stood to go. At the door he turned. Eleanor? Yes. My grandmother Prescott was a Hargrove wife too. My grandfather was not a good man. She used to say something to me when I was small. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. What did she say? She said, the Hargrove women are who the Hargrove men are measured by, not the other way around. He nodded at her. He left. Ellie stood in the doorway of her mother's house. She watched his car drive away down the leafy road. The oak leaves were yellowing. The afternoon was soft. She put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, hard. Okay, little one, she said out loud. We are building something, you and me, together. The trial began 3 weeks later. It was not a divorce trial. That would come later. That would drag on for a year. The tabloid photographers would follow her for a year. The hearings would go on, and every settlement offer Whit's lawyers would be laughably small. And every time she refused it, they would come back with a better one. This was the criminal trial. The district attorney of New York County had charged Whit with aggravated assault and reckless endangerment of an unborn child. The DA was a short woman in her 50s, with a voice like a closing elevator door. She had told Ellie, in their first meeting, I'm going to get you a conviction, Miss Prescott, but I need you on that stand. Can you do that? Yes, Ellie had said. I can do that. The courtroom was not like television. It was smaller than she had expected, duller. The wood was scratched. The overhead lights buzzed. The gallery was full. Reporters in the back rows, 2 sketch artists. Colette next to her on the prosecution's side. Margaret behind her. Garrett, quietly, at the end of a row. On the other side, Whit in a suit that cost more than most cars. His team of lawyers. Vivian in black. Harper was not there. Harper had left Whit 2 weeks after the arrest. Ellie had found out from a gossip column. She had not been sad. Declan took the stand on the 3rd day. He walked up the aisle in a dark gray suit. His hair was cut short. His shoulders barely fit the witness chair. Please state your name for the record. Declan Michael Boyd. Your occupation. Director of Executive Protection, Hargrove Hotel Group. Prior experience: 12 years, United States Marine Corps. 6 years, professional mixed martial arts, middleweight division. Retired from competition 2 years ago. Mr. Boyd, on the morning in question, what did you see when you entered the apartment? Declan did not flinch. I entered the apartment through the front door. The door was open. I heard shouting, and then I heard a sound I understood to be a woman's head hitting a hard surface. I walked into the kitchen. I saw Mrs. Prescott on the floor. She was 8.5 months pregnant. There was blood in her hair. Her hands were on her stomach. I saw Mr. Hargrove standing over her. His right hand was open. Her hair was in his left hand. The gallery went still. Your witness, counselor. Witt's lawyer cross-examined him for 40 minutes. He tried to twist him. He tried to suggest that Ellie had attacked first, that Witt had been defending himself, that Declan had misread the scene. Declan did not bend. Sir, I was 20 feet from them when I came through the door. She was on the floor. He was on his feet. Her hands were on her stomach. His hand was in her hair. I know what I saw. I will know what I saw for the rest of my life. Witt's lawyer sat down. One of the jurors, a woman with gray hair and a cardigan, wiped her eyes. Ellie took the stand on the 5th day. She wore a soft blue dress. Her daughter had been born 3 days earlier. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a healthy set of lungs. A name her mother had whispered into her ear the first time she had held her. June Margaret Prescott. June. For the month, Ellie had met her mother again. For the month, her daughter had arrived. For the summer that was beginning in a life she had not known she was allowed to have. Ellie had not wanted to bring the baby to the courthouse. Colette had not wanted her to. Dr. Wren had told her not to. But the DA had said, softly, if you feel up to it, and if you are willing, I would like the jury to see you as the mother you are. I would not ask you to weaponize your daughter. I am asking you to be honest about who you are now. Ellie had thought about it. She had brought the baby. June slept in Margaret's arms in the gallery. Ellie sat in the witness chair. She looked at the jury. She looked at Witt. She looked at the woman with the cardigan, who nodded at her. Ms. Prescott. Yes? Can you tell the court what happened on the morning of March 12th? She told them. She told them in a voice she did not recognize at first. A quiet, steady, adult voice. A voice that did not plead. A voice that did not apologize. A voice that belonged to Eleanor Prescott, of the Prescott women, who had been telling true things to the heir of Kitchens for generations. She told them about the ring indent. She told them about the laugh. She told them about the Pierre Hotel. She told them about the receipt. She told them about the kitchen. She told them about the marble floor. She did not cry on the stand. She cried once in the courthouse bathroom after. She stood over the sink. She splashed cold water on her face. She looked up at her reflection in the harsh, fluorescent light. She looked at Eleanor Prescott. Eleanor Prescott was 30 years old. She had a bruise on her temple that had mostly faded. She had shadows under her eyes. She had the soft, tired body of a woman who had just given birth. She had hair that had not been blown out in a salon in 2 months. She did not recognize the woman in the mirror. Not because the woman was broken, because the woman was not. I am not crazy, she said out loud to her own reflection. I was never crazy. I saw what I saw. She said it 3 times. She dried her hands. She walked out. The jury was out for 2 days. When they came back, the foreman stood. He was a man in his 50s, an electrician from Queens. He read the verdict without looking at Witt. Guilty, aggravated assault. Guilty, reckless endangerment. Witt was led out in handcuffs. He did not look at Ellie. He looked at his mother. His mother looked at the floor. Vivian Hargrove, for the first time in her adult life, had nothing to say. Outside the courthouse, the cameras flashed. The reporters shouted. Colette had her arm around Ellie. Margaret had the baby. They walked down the steps toward the car. At the bottom of the steps, Declan was standing. He was not smiling. He was just there. Ellie stopped. "Thank you," she said. "You did that, Ellie, not me. You started it. You finished it." They looked at each other for a moment. "Where are you going now?" he said. "Home. My mother's house, for a while. And then, I don't know, somewhere else. Somewhere new." He nodded. "Can I call you?" he said. She looked at him. "Not today," she said. "Not today. But maybe. Later, when I am a whole thing. I will wait. You don't have to. I know. That is why I will." She smiled at him. A small smile. The first real smile she had smiled at a man, any man, in a long time. She got into the car. She held her daughter. She went home. 18 months passed. Time does funny things. After a crisis, the first months were slow. Each morning was a whole year. Each afternoon, she thought, "I will not survive this one." Each evening, she survived it. Each night, she looked at the baby sleeping, and she thought, "One more day. Just one more day. Keep going." Then, somewhere around month 6, time sped up. June started sleeping through the night. Ellie started sleeping through the night. The house in Connecticut became too small, and her mother's love, which was a good love, became a love she needed to step out from under in order to grow her own. She looked at apartments in the city. She could not bear the city. She looked at apartments in the suburbs. She could not bear the suburbs. She drove one weekend, with June in the car seat and Margaret in the passenger seat, up the Hudson River. She did not know why. She just wanted to drive. They stopped in a small town called Hudson, New York. They walked the main street. They had grilled cheese at a cafe. June, now walking, chased a pigeon on the sidewalk. There was a "for rent" sign on a little white building with big windows. Ellie looked at the sign. She looked at the windows. She thought quietly, "I could draw here." She called the number on the sign. The studio was on the second floor, 900 square feet, hardwood floors, 3 tall north-facing windows, a fireplace that had been painted over sometime in the 1980s, a little galley kitchen in the corner. Ellie stood in the middle of the empty space. The realtor, a woman named Diane in a pink blazer, watched her. "Takes a while to know, honey. I know. You take your time." Ellie walked to the windows. She looked out. The main street was small. A bookstore, a coffee shop, a man walking a dog, a woman carrying a bag of groceries, a little slice of life. She put her hand on the window. "I'll take it. You don't want to think about it." "I have been thinking about it for 18 months. Diane smiled. "Okay, honey, let's fill out the paperwork." She opened the studio 3 months later. She called it the Prescott Studio. She sold charcoal portraits, small ones. She charged $120 a sitting. She drew anyone who came in. An old man with his dog, a young couple engaged to be married, a little boy with a toy truck, a nurse on her lunch break. She drew people the way she had drawn Dottie. She drew what she saw, the tired shoulder, the kind mouth, the way a grandmother's hands remembered hard work even at rest. She was not famous. She was not rich. The studio broke even in the second month. It made a little money in the third. By the 6th month, it made enough. Enough was a miracle. June had a nap pallet in the corner. She slept there while her mother drew. When she was awake, she scribbled on butcher paper at a little low table Margaret had set up. Scribbles, wild lines. The first shapes of a child who watches her mother make lines and understands, deeply and without being told, that making lines is what this family does. One morning in the fall, Colette called. "Did you hear?" "Hear what?" "Wit is out. Parole. Good behavior." Ellie was painting the trim in the studio kitchen. She was holding a brush. She was standing in paint-splattered jeans. She paused. "Okay," she said. "Also," Colette said. Harper apparently left him 2 months into his sentence. Ellie laughed. Not cruel, just human. Colette, yeah. I haven't thought about him in weeks. Good, babe. Is that bad? That is incredible. That is the whole point. That is the goal. It just happened. One day I realized I had not thought about him. I could not remember the last time I had. Ellie, yeah. That is healing. That is what healing is. It is not forgetting. It is forgetting to remember. Ellie smiled. She put the brush back in the paint can. She looked at her daughter, who was pulling every single plastic spice jar out of the kitchen cabinet and lining them up on the floor. Alphabetical, Ellie said out loud. June, are you alphabetizing? June said, Abba. Close enough, baby, Ellie said. She hung up with Colette. She stood in the doorway of her little studio kitchen. She watched her daughter line up the spice jars in a wobbly toddler row. She thought about her mother's spice cabinet at 2 a.m, on the worst night of her life. She thought, my daughter is learning to put things in order from me. She thought, I am teaching her, without meaning to, that the world can be set right a little at a time. She thought, of all the things I will give her, that may be the best one. That afternoon, she took June for a walk down the main street. She went into the little grocery store. She needed pears for dinner. She put June on her hip. She walked to the produce section. She looked up. Across the produce aisle, next to the apples, stood Whit. He was thinner. His hair was grayer. He was wearing a flannel shirt that did not fit him right. He looked like a man who was trying to be somebody else. He looked, honestly, like a man who was trying to be his brother Garrett. He saw her. His mouth opened. She looked at him. She really looked at him. She waited. She waited for the grief. The grief did not come. She waited for the anger. The anger did not come. She waited for the pull. The pull did not come. She waited for anything at all. There was nothing. He was a stranger, buying apples in a grocery store. He was a man who had once been the whole sky of her life. And now he was not the sky. He was not even a cloud. He was a man with thinner hair, standing too long next to the apples, opening and closing his mouth. She turned to June. Pears or peaches, sweet girl? Pear, June said. Pears it is. She put 3 pears in a bag. She walked, with her daughter on her hip, past her ex-husband, without looking at him, without rushing, without performing. At the checkout, the young cashier smiled at June. How old, Mama? She just turned 2. Oh my, she is beautiful. She is. Ellie paid. She walked out into the fall afternoon. The leaves on the little Hudson Main Street were turning gold. A church bell rang somewhere. June chewed on the edge of the grocery bag. And inside Eleanor Prescott, behind her ribs, where once there had been a small voice saying, you have known this for a long time. You just did not want to know it. There was now a different kind of quiet. A quiet that was not empty. A quiet that was her own. That evening, she sat on the porch of her little house. It was a small rented cottage, 3 blocks from the studio, white clapboard, a red door, a crooked little apple tree in the yard. June was asleep inside. Margaret was visiting for the weekend, dozing with a book on her chest in the living room. Ellie sat on the porch steps. She had a cup of coffee, black. The stars were coming out over the Hudson. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was a text from Declan. They had not talked in 6 months. Then, one day that spring, she had been at the farmer's market in Hudson, and she had turned around with a bag of tomatoes in her hand, and he had been standing there. He had moved to Hudson. 3 months earlier, he had bought out of his contract with the Hargrove Group. He had opened a jiu-jitsu gym for kids in a warehouse at the edge of town. 14 kids, half of them on scholarship. He had not told her. He had not tracked her down. He had not come looking. He had moved because he had fallen in love with Hudson during one of the times he had come up to check on her a year ago. And because, he said, standing in the farmer's market with a tomato in his hand, I just needed to be somewhere that was about starting over. They had gone for coffee. They had gone for coffee twice in 6 months, only twice. He had never asked for more. He had been, the whole time, the kind of man who would wait without asking to be waited for. The text said, June's birthday coming up soon. I found something she might like. Can I drop by Saturday? Ellie looked at the phone. She did not answer right away. She wanted to sit with the feeling. She wanted to sit with the fact that a text from a man was a question, that a text from a man was not a summons, that a text from a man was not a test she had to pass, that a text from a man was not a piece of information about her location that she was required to provide, that a text from a man was a question, and she was allowed to take her time with the answer, and the answer did not have to be what he wanted. And he, this man, Declan Boyd, who had put a gas station bouquet on her windowsill when she was bleeding into a hospital pillow, would accept the answer either way. She thought about that. She thought about it for a long time on the porch while the stars came out. She thought about her marriage. She thought about the 7 years she had spent learning to pour coffee the way he liked, and arrange peonies the way he liked, and laugh at jokes the way he liked, and go to events in the earrings he liked, and disappear into a costume that had never fit her. She thought about the morning she had stood in the bathroom and seen the missing ring indent. She thought about sitting in the parked Mercedes for 47 minutes. She thought about scrubbing grout with a toothbrush at 3 in the morning. She thought about the marble floor. She thought about Declan kneeling next to her, saying, "What is your baby's name?" She thought about her mother in the passenger seat of her car with 2 mugs of tea and no questions. She thought about Garrett's briefcase on her mother's kitchen table. She thought about the juror with the cardigan who had wiped her eyes. She thought about the jail sentence, the divorce, the settlement, the sale of the penthouse, the quiet check that had come from Vivian months later with no note. She had not cashed it. She had framed the check and put it on the wall of the studio. Colette had laughed so hard she had cried. She thought about her mother's spice cabinet. She thought about every single one of those small things. And it occurred to her, suddenly, on the porch, under the stars, that these were not a list of traumas. These were a list of how she had built a life, one cabinet at a time, one cup of black coffee at a time, one cheap spiral sketchbook at a time, one maiden name at a time, one no at a time, one yes at a time. She thought, I used to think I was in a prison. She thought, I used to think the prison door was locked from the outside. She thought, the prison door was unlocked the whole time. I was my own jailer. I was my own warden. The man I married told me the outside world was worse, and I believed him. And I locked myself in, and I handed him the key, and I asked him, please, sir, will you guard me from the world? The world, it turned out, was the easy part. The hard part was realizing I was the one who had been holding the door shut. Inside the house, June stirred. Ellie heard her through the baby monitor on the porch railing. A soft little sound, a sleepy word, Mama. A turning over, back to sleep. Ellie put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry. She had done her crying. She sat on the porch step and she watched the sky. She thought about her daughter. Her daughter was going to grow up in a house where her mother drew. Her daughter was going to grow up in a house where her mother drank black coffee because she liked it. Her daughter was going to grow up in a house where her mother said no, and sometimes yes, and always, always meant it. Her daughter was going to grow up with her mother's name. Her daughter was going to grow up watching her mother line up spice jars alphabetically when the world got too big, because that was what the Prescott women did. They set the small things in order, and they kept going. Her daughter was going to grow up knowing. Knowing what, Ellie thought? Knowing that when the sky falls, she can pick it up piece by piece and she can build a new sky. And the new sky will be better than the old one, because the new skies will belong to her. Ellie picked up her phone. She looked at Declan's text. June's birthday coming up soon. I found something she might like. Can I drop by Saturday? She thought about Declan. She thought about the kind of man he was. She thought about the way, in 6 months, he had not once asked her to explain. The way, in 6 months, he had not once told her what she felt. The way in 6 months, he had shown up only when asked, and had gone home without drama when she had said, "This was nice. I think I will go home now." She thought about how safe felt different from loved. She thought about how she had confused those things for 7 years, and she did not intend to confuse them again. She thought about the fact that she did not know, yet, if she was ready to love anyone. She thought about the fact that Declan Boyd was not asking her to love anyone. He was asking if he could drop by on Saturday. She typed with her thumbs. "Saturday works. Come at 4. I'll make coffee." She paused. She smiled a little. She added one more line. "Black. Bitter. The way I like it." She hit send. She put the phone down on the porch step. She looked up at the stars over Hudson. They were not wishing stars. She was not wishing on them. She was just seeing them for what they were. Not symbols, not signs, not messages from the universe. Just stars, far away, old, burning their own fires in their own sky. She breathed in, she breathed out. She had been a bride. She had been a prisoner. She had been a patient. She had been a defendant's ex-wife. She had been a mother. She had been a woman in an expensive dress at a charity benefit who smiled and smiled and smiled and felt nothing. Tonight, for the first time since she was 22 years old, she was not any of those things. Tonight she was just Eleanor. Eleanor, who drew the world. Eleanor, who raised a daughter. Eleanor, who had survived the worst thing that a man could do to her, and still knew which pears were ripe at the little grocery store on Main Street, and still knew how she liked her coffee, and still knew the names of every single spice in her kitchen cabinet, in alphabetical order. Inside the house, June made another small sound. Ellie stood up. She left the phone on the step. She left the coffee on the porch railing. She went inside to her daughter. She lay down on the bed next to the crib. She watched June sleep. Her daughter's small chest rose and fell. Her tiny hand curled and uncurled. She was dreaming something. Somewhere, in the private world, behind her closed eyelids, she was running, or dancing, or drawing. Ellie put her hand on the rail of the crib. "Sweet girl," she whispered. "I love you. I love you. I love you. Sleep." June did not wake. Ellie stayed there a long time. She stayed until Margaret came in from the living room in her soft cardigan and put a hand on Ellie's shoulder and whispered, "Come to bed, baby." Ellie stood. She went to bed. She slept deeply. She slept the way she had slept as a child in this same kind of house, in this same kind of night, before she had ever heard the name Hargrove, before she had ever confused silence for love, before she had ever handed anyone the keys to her own door. Outside, on the porch step, her phone buzzed once. A text back from Declan. 4 works. Black coffee. Looking forward to it. The phone screen went dark. The stars kept burning. The Hudson River kept moving south to the sea. The wind moved through the crooked apple tree in the yard. And in the little rented cottage on the little side street of the little town of Hudson, New York, a woman named Eleanor Prescott slept the sleep of the reclaimed. Her daughter slept beside her. Her mother slept in the next room. The small, careful world she had built out of black coffee and cheap sketchbooks and alphabetical spice cabinets and long, honest, quiet sentences held them all. It held. It was holding. It was going to hold. If this story has reached someone tonight who is still inside the old sky, if you are reading this or hearing this and your own kitchen is quiet in the wrong way, if you are counting ceiling tiles at 3 in the morning, please hear this. The prison door is unlocked. It has been unlocked the whole time. You do not have to pick up the whole sky at once. You have to pick up one cabinet. You have to pour 1 cup of black coffee. You have to buy one $3.79 sketchbook. You have to sign your own name once on one piece of paper the way you used to sign it when you were 22. You have to do one small true thing. And then, tomorrow, you have to do another one. The world on the other side of that door is not what you have been told. The world on the other side of that door is where you live. We are saving a seat for you. We will leave the coffee on. Black, bitter, the way you like it.
If you're still here with me, I want to say thank you. Thank you for staying through all of it. The small receipts, the cold kitchen, the marble floor, the hospital room at 3 in the morning, the courtroom, the first cup of black coffee, the little studio in Hudson with the 3 tall windows. Thank you for walking every step of it with me. Because this was not just a story about a cheating husband or a violent moment or a man in handcuffs. This was a story about a woman who forgot who she was and then slowly, bravely, one small true thing at a time, remembered. And I think every woman watching this right now knows something about that journey. Maybe you are not in a penthouse on the Upper East Side. Maybe your husband is not a billionaire. Maybe your kitchen is a small one, and your worries are small ones, and your life looks nothing like Eleanor's from the outside. But I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear me. The shape of the prison does not matter. The size of the cage does not matter. What matters is whether the door is locked from the inside or from the outside. And for so many of us, for so much of our lives, we have been told the door is locked from the outside. We have been told the world is cruel. We have been told no one else will love us. We have been told we are lucky to have what we have. We have been told to be grateful. We have been told to keep quiet. We have been told our hormones are unreliable, and our memories are unreliable, and our feelings are unreliable. And the one thing we must rely on is the man standing in front of us telling us all of these things. I want you to hear this tonight. The door is unlocked. It has been unlocked the whole time. You do not have to believe me yet. You do not have to be ready yet. You do not have to walk through it yet. But please, tonight, just know it is there. Just know it opens. Just know the world on the other side is not the world you have been told it is. The world on the other side is where you live. The world on the other side is where a woman drinks her coffee the way she likes it, where a woman writes her own name on the birth certificate, where a woman sits on a porch with stars above her and a sleeping daughter inside and understands, maybe for the first time in her whole life, that she is allowed to choose. And I want to say something to anyone watching who is still in that kitchen, still in that quiet, still counting the ceiling tiles at 3 in the morning. You are not crazy. You are not imagining it. You are not hormonal. You are not ungrateful. You are not the problem. You are a woman who is beginning to see. And seeing is the first thing. Seeing is the beginning of everything. If you are in danger tonight, please reach out to someone you trust. A friend, a family member, a local domestic violence hotline, someone who will sit in a parked car with you and hand you a mug of tea and not ask you a single question until you are ready to speak. Those people exist. I promise you they exist. And if you are here tonight because you are healing, because you already walked out, because you are on the other side of your own story, just starting over, drinking your first cup of black coffee in a very long time, I want you to know something too. You are not alone. We are a whole line of women, stretching back for generations and forward into your daughter's life and her daughter's life. Women who set the small things in order when the world gets too big. Women who alphabetize the spice cabinets at 2 in the morning. Women who sign their own names. Women who survived the worst thing and still know which pears are ripe. You are one of us. We are saving a seat for you. We left the coffee on. Black, bitter, the way you like it. If this story touched something in you tonight, please do me one small favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me one small thing you did for yourself this week. It can be tiny. A cup of coffee the way you like it, a book you read in bed. No, you said out loud. I want to read every single one. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this. And if you know a woman who needs to hear these words tonight, please share this with her. Your share could be the thing that unlocks her door. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being one of the women who keeps the light on for the rest of us. Good night, sweet friend. Take care of yourself, and remember, the door is unlocked. This story was carefully researched, developed, and hand-edited by our team to bring you meaning, healing, and lessons that matter. Every word was written with the hope that it might reach the one person tonight who needed to hear it most. If that person was you, we are so glad you are here.